Athletes have not been bashful at lending their voice to social justice causes, as a chorus of people have called for change to the criminal justice system. Case in point is the WNBA's dedication of their season to Breonna Taylor, the young Kentucky woman who was senselessly murdered in her home while she slept. Meanwhile, sports has been woven back into the fabric of our everyday lives. However, the question remains, how long will they be with us? And can they operate safely? Kelly Walker is a sports writer and podcast host for Lifestyle Frisco. She covers local and national sports for the publication, and she joined me this week to have a wide ranging sports discussion. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. So, Kelly, if you're ready, we'll take a few minutes and welcome you to the show. And we're excited to have a sports roundtable with you this morning. So great to see you, and thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm ready.
So, when we look, Kelly, at the WNBA's message, us sort of supporting uh, Breonna Taylor for the year and their whole social justice movement in supporting her case, I'm just wondering if I can start you off by asking your perspective on that whole entire situation.
I love it. I think it's a strong message and I think it's necessary. I think what a better platform than for women to be able to stand up and use their voice in that way. I think it's much needed right now. Anytime that we can do better for social justice and help fix racism. I know it's not going to go away completely overnight by any means, but anytime that athletes who are in the spotlight can use that to help, I say let's do it. And we're seeing more and more, I guess outrage and some backlash when people are kneeling for anthems and wearing Black Lives Matter shirts and different ways that they're putting their voice out there. And it's frustrating to me because it's more than just, kneeling or putting a shirt on. They're really, really trying to make change happen and for their teammates and their communities and people all over the country and all over the world, really. So I hope it works. I hope people listen, even if just a few people every time stop what they're doing and listen and go get educated and look something up. I think it's all for the better.
And I know you're not a political figure, but it all stems in the same realm. So I'm going to ask you if you think the president is missing an opportunity to positively affect the debate with his rhetoric on the whole issue.
Sure, I do. You're right. I'm not a political figure by any stretch of the imagination, but just from, I use Twitter a lot, and just from the small lens of that, even as of today, I think President Trump commented about people aren't happy seeing Tyler Sagan, for example. I'm in the Dallas world, kneel for the anthem, and then the comments are kind of interesting to read. It's like, well, that's fine. They aren't trying to make people happy. So I do think he is missing an opportunity to embrace a little bit of that leadership role and help rather than point out any of the negatives that he might see from his point of view.
Now, I know that you have two kids in sports, and I know that they're about to go back to school. So I'm wondering, from a parent perspective, how nervous you are about them returning both to school and to the playing field this fall.
You know, a few months ago, I probably would have said that I was more nervous than I am today. So as we have a high schooler, we feel better today than we did because even starting in June, our high school was able to start strength and conditioning workouts. So she's been there on campus working out in small cohort groups of 10 people, 10 girls. Well, there's hundreds of kids there, but she's in a small group of 10 that's consistent, that group, getting temperature scanned every day, wearing masks in and out, wiping down equipment, all these precautions. And I'm amazed that we've been lucky enough to not have any issues, health issues with that. There's been no, big outbreaks or really instances of positive cases in our school, even in our whole community. So I actually feel better about the sports piece from my daughter because they've already had a few months of it and seem to be handling it well so far. I know there's some luck in that too, but we've been lucky so far. And her sports will go forward about a month delayed as far as games and everything, and I'm okay with that. I feel pretty good about it. They're doing everything they can to stay healthy. Now my younger son, he plays youth sports recreationally and at some competitive levels, and they too have been managing to have practices all summer, and it's been okay. There hasn't been any major issues or kind of outbreaks of positive cases like we've seen in the pro level sports, of course. So actually my comfort level, every week we get through it and everybody's still healthy and happy and there's no major issues, I feel better and better about it.
Now, from internally going back to school, outside of sports, are you worried with anything there, or not so much?
Yeah, I mean, of course I'm worried, but not to a high level of worry. The first few weeks of school, they'll be at home, and then early September, they're able to go on campus. We have the majority, about half to 65% of our parents are opting to send their kids in person on the campuses that my kids will attend. And right now, actually today, the teachers go back and they're preparing classrooms, putting in distance and plexiglass, all these different things, to where I truly feel that our kids wouldn't be allowed back in until it's time, until they're ready to get back there. So our community has been really lucky. I don't want to downplay the severity in other parts of the country and the world because I know that it's very prevalent and people are dying. Our community is spread out and has just a lot of green space and lots of ways that people are out, and somehow we are being we haven't had a lot of deaths. There have been a few, like literally the number I can count on one hand over this entire period of time. So and we have a couple 100,000 people in our community, so my level of worry is actually pretty low at this point for them to get back into school.
Well, that's good. I'm also wondering, as a reporter for sports, how has that part of your life changed, considering the times we're living in?
A lot. I'm not getting to be on the field, on the sidelines at FC Dallas games. Not getting to interview players at the ballpark like I normally would right now, and getting to do all of those things that I really enjoy professionally and personally, to getting to go to those things with family. So it's definitely changed a lot. I mean, I still get to talk to people via Zoom. It's not the same. I just don't have the same interaction with folks. And of course, during the downtime, it was almost non-existent, me getting to like have any interaction in sports, really just waiting and hoping. That's kicked up a little bit in the last few weeks as things are all changing and ramping up again as all the restarts are happening.
Now, in which ways do you think sports reporting will change because of this time?
Well, I wonder, even when games come back, I mean, we might have professional soccer here in Frisco, Texas, as early as next week. So our FC Dallas team will play Nashville a few times. I wonder, will media still have credentialed access to the press box? I'm not sure. Will we even have access to the field or locker room press conferences after? I think all of it might look completely different. I might not be able to do all those same functions that I used to. It might just be seeing it remotely from home and just gathering as much information as I can. And of course, you'll miss out on the feel, the vibe, the energy, all those little nuances that you get when you're there in person and up close. So I don't know yet how it's going to look, but I do think that there's a really good chance that people in my position won't have access to the local sports that we used to.
Now, when we look at baseball, certainly we look at it started with the Marlins outbreak. And as you know, I'm here in Canada. I live in Windsor, which is the city right across the river from Detroit. And the Tigers series just got canceled or postponed with the Cardinals because of the outbreak. So I'm wondering your thoughts on the state of baseball and whether we'll get through the season.
I'm worried about Major League Baseball. I don't know if we'll get through this season. Even this shortened season, it seemed so short when they first announced it in mid-July. Now seeing how in a bubble like the MLS that first wants to kind of form that bubble, even we saw outbreaks there as that began without any kind of bubble. I don't know if Major League Baseball is going to be able to contain enough positive cases or enough to contain everybody enough to stop the spread of the virus, enough to continue this season. I mean, they're already talking about having to maybe shut it down again when, 17 players. I think when you and I first started talking about today talking, it was like eight players. And then that every few days there were 4 or 5 more on the Marlins. It changes so fast. And with them having to cancel 20% of their games every said weekend, I don't know if they'll be able to continue that. And I don't know how they can contain it if players are moving freely back and forth from ballparks and traveling and seeing their family. It just might not work. I hope it does.
They don't have a bubble like the NBA, so it may not work as well. I'm wondering your thoughts. I know that you also play sports yourself, and I'm wondering your thoughts on how we get more girls involved in sports, because I really think there is an opportunity now to get girls exposed to what they might like to do from a sports perspective. So I'm wondering your thoughts on that.
I love seeing when girls are more involved in sports. I think a lot of it starts with 2 things, parents, right? And then role models. Growing up, our parents let us really do a lot of different things. We started as gymnasts, which really gave us a good foundation for being athletes and athletic and strong. But then even at a competitive point, I was able to change and say, I want to play softball. Okay. There was no pressure to continue on the gymnastics track, even though usually that can be the case. They let me go and switch sports. And then another year or 2 later, I continued to play softball, but then played basketball and tried everything that I could, and tennis even in high school. And so having parents that are open-minded and not funnel that child to a specific sport, maybe because of their gender, or not even sports at all, just other outside activities, I think that's a huge part of it. Parents have to be open-minded and not put their own ideas on what their kids end up doing. And then the role models. I mean, growing up with my gymnastics example, I looked up to people like Mary Lou Retton and gymnasts that were competing before me, and that helped me, of course, want to do better in that sport. And now it's better than ever. I mean, because of social media, these athletes they're in front of young girls even more and more. I watch a lot of soccer. So soccer is kind of the big example for me, but you have, Serena Williams. I mean, you have somebody in every major sport now that a young girl can see and strive to be. And so those strong role models, I think, is just a huge part of it. And they're showing the girls that they don't have to be a certain look of a girl. They can be, a plain girl that doesn't wear makeup and doesn't, have frilly clothes or whatever. And that can be a strong person that people look up to and have a successful career in sports.
And I know that you are based in Dallas, so I'd be remiss if I didn't sneak in a Cowboys question, and I'll combine it with an NFL question. What do you think about the state of the NFL season moving forward? There are a lot of players opting out. And what's the move there in Dallas about the Cowboys being able to start the season?
Yeah. The Cowboys have been pretty quiet, which is something you don't hear very often. We've heard less from Jerry Jones in the last several months than I can ever remember. I think that I hope that everything moves forward and that there is a successful NFL season. I think they're too big to not have a season. They'll figure out something. And yes, I know, like you said, players are opting out, but there's kind of an unending pool of players I think that will step up and want to have their chance. And even if it's some of the marquee players that end up opting out, I still think that the NFL will create a product and put on the field. It probably won't be as robust of a season as we're used to, but I don't think the Cowboys and Jerry Jones will do anything other than, 100% everything that he could possibly do to get this season going. He needs to.
And then just my final question for you has to do with, what do you think we can learn from the absence of when we didn't have sports to them returning now? How do you think we'll value sports in the future?
Well, I think it's really interesting, the few sports that we are able to see so far, the purity of the sport when there's no fans. I think it's changed a little bit of how we are watching it, how we're seeing it, and how we're feeling it. When there's not natural, organic, fan noise, and we're hearing maybe more player voices as they're in play, or like what the NHL's doing, and it seems a little bit more focused on the game and purposely kind of quiet. I think that's bringing out a little bit more of the purity of the sport, which I like. I like being able to watch a MLB game and hearing the crack of the bat and actually like hearing what's going on the field, and not focusing so much about all the other distractions. So I like the purity of the sport. I also think it's going to make us notice the power of the player a little bit more. Like we talked about the NFL players who are opting out. We're just hearing players' voices more now than we are used to in a normal preseason or a regular playing season, because of, the racial injustice issue we talked about at the beginning. They're using this time to speak up and be heard. And I love that. I think we're noticing what players are made of, and not just on the field. So I like that part about it. I think the third thing is we're noticing the impact that the downtime had on players' bodies, especially in baseball. We're seeing these kind of outrageous injuries after, our star pitcher after one inning, he's injured. And it happened in Houston. It's happening a little bit more and more now in baseball. So I think we're seeing this interruption in training really physically impact a lot of these players. And so that's kind of an interesting storyline.
Kelly, I want to thank you for a couple of minutes today. I really enjoyed our wide-ranging sports discussion, and I want to thank you for joining us this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.